What's up, good people? This is D talking and welcome to the topic. Today or this evening, let's discuss uncomfortable story. Be ready to be uncomfortable. So today we're going to dive into politics. So we are going to discuss a little bit uncomfortable story. Let us feel uncomfortable for good because we are going to discuss this story which has a just single line story about Africans. Someone asked me directly. This was the question. It happened. This guy saw me and hey bro, what's up? How are you doing? I say I'm doing cool. I'm just about to leave. No, if you'll excuse me, I have two questions to ask you. No big deal. Let us discuss what you have. I'm listening. First question I want to ask you, where are you from? And I say, I'm from Langley. And I say, why do you want to know where I came from? We had this news from South Africa, so I just want to ask you questions so that I can understand what really is going on. This news from media that say currently Africans don't like Caucasian people in their land. Is that true? I have one example from Kenya. This is one of the factors why African people are suffering the pain that
and the neo-colonial structures
these so-called investors. Let's dive into video part 1 about Kenya, narrated by Hound of History Network from Kenya. They have a really good story and credit goes to him because that is his video.
Welcome to the Baraza. Here we demystify the miseducation of Africa and Africans by tracing our roots, values, and dissect our social issues. Let's talk. They call it conservation. They say it's for the animals, for the future. But let's take a closer look. Beneath the glamorous wildlife documentaries and the pristine game parks lies a story of deceit, exploitation, and betrayal. A betrayal not just of Kenya's wildlife, but of its people. This isn't conservation. It's colonization, wrapped in the guise of protection. Decades after Kenya's independence, the same foreign hands that seized its land still control its natural resources. The Maasai, Samburu, and other indigenous peoples who lived in harmony with wildlife for centuries have been cast aside. Their lands, stolen. Now they're playgrounds for the rich. For every dollar spent by a tourist on these lands, the local people, the true stewards of this land, are left with nothing but empty promises. Those glossy brochures, they don't show the real cost of conservation. They don't show the hundreds of Maasai families forced off their land to make way for protected areas. They don't show the countless lives lost to human-wildlife conflict, children, women, men, sacrificed for the comfort of foreign tourists. Ah yes, while the world praises Kenya for its wildlife conservation, local communities are condemned to lives of poverty and danger. Forced to fetch water from rivers where crocodiles lurk, denied the right to graze their cattle on lands they've lived on for generations. And if they dare cross into these parks, they're branded poachers. Their crime, merely trying to survive. These lands, once shared harmoniously between humans and wildlife, are now fenced off, reserved for the wealthy. But where is the justice for the Maasai elder whose cattle die of thirst? Where is the justice for the children orphaned by elephants, their parents' deaths dismissed as mere statistics? Let's not forget the armed rangers patrolling these lands, ready to protect them, not from foreign exploitation, but from their own people. Because heaven forbid the local population should want to benefit from their own heritage. This is not about saving elephants or lions. It's about power. It's about wealth. It's about foreign entities taking what they have no right to, while the true custodians of this land are left to starve. It's a global heist, dressed up as green philanthropy. Because who wouldn't want to save Africa's animals, especially when there's a nice tourist dollar involved? And what's the answer to this elaborate charade? Perpetuate a wildlife apartheid. Separate the people from the animals. Create parks, conservancies, and wildlife corridors. Construct fences, charge at the park gates, and perpetuate laws that put the animals first while tucking communities away in some dusty policy document. Throw in some rapid-fire promises of schools and dispensaries while you're at it, just to keep up appearances. In the beginning, it was all about romantic ideals, right? The old traditional vision lost out, herded into history's cupboard. its defenders. Narrow men entranced by new titles and vague assurances, more interested in brandy than the people they were supposed to represent. Their bargaining chip: land. Over half a century ago, they negotiated away the Mara and Amboseli. Today, they sell off, privatize, and fence off chunks of communal land to the highest bidder. Propped up by millions from international donors and indifferent to the resentment they provoke, the conservation community in Kenya has continued to advance a theory and practice of conservation that is almost unchanged since the days of Teddy Roosevelt. Only now, instead of shooting the animals, they're saving them for a price. On the flip side, those who dare to kill for protein are branded as poachers, while their kill is labeled bushmeat. Meanwhile, with the right connections and a European accent, you can buy a slice of wilderness, call it a game ranch, shoot the wildlife, and get away with saying it's culling. Because who doesn't love a little euphemism, right? Conservation in Kenya alienates locals, pronounced WATUS, from their resources. It refuses to take any blame for the decimation of pastoralist economies, but is quick to take over the now empty lands with their silent population. And for what? A pittance of the revenues initially promised. A slick marketing campaign that calls it community-based conservation. But here's the wake-up call. The truth is this: conservation without people is not conservation. It is exploitation. It is theft. It is the erasure of a way of life, the destruction of a community's bond with the land, and the theft of their future. It's time to rip the mask off this so-called conservation model and recognize it for what it is: a continuation of colonial exploitation, dressed up in environmentalist jargon. The people of Kenya deserve more than empty promises. They deserve their land back. They deserve a seat at the table where decisions are made about their heritage, their livelihoods, and their future. The Maasai, the Samburu, and all the indigenous people of Kenya should be the ones leading conservation, not watching from the outside while their land is fenced off for profit. The real conservation crisis isn't just about poaching or dwindling wildlife populations. It's about the systematic exclusion of the very people who have protected this land for centuries. The wake-up call is this: if we continue down this path, there will be nothing left. No wildlife, no communities, no future. The choice is now ours, collectively, because conservation is not just a Kenyan issue, it's a global one. The systems and structures that keep indigenous communities sidelined in Kenya are the same ones that marginalize local voices in countless other places worldwide. The world needs to understand that conserving wildlife and protecting local communities are not mutually exclusive goals. In fact, they are inseparable. True conservation can only thrive when those who live with the land, who depend on it, and who love it are not just considered, but empowered. So here's the call to action. If we truly care about the future of wildlife in Africa, we must break the chains of exploitation disguised as conservation. We must reject the romanticized narratives of heroism that overlook the exploitation happening on the ground. Instead, we should demand transparency, demand equitable partnerships, and demand that the people of Kenya, the rightful guardians of this land, are allowed to lead. They don't need charity, and they don't need sensitization. They need respect, autonomy, and support to build a model of conservation that truly works for them. And to the international organizations and donors who genuinely care, it's time to listen. Listen to the communities who understand this land in ways you never could. Support them, not by imposing your models and ideals, but by standing with them as allies. Help them reclaim their land, their voice, and their rights. To everyone else, the tourists, the documentary viewers, the casual supporters of conservation, know that the next time you see an ad or a glossy photo in a magazine, the reality behind it may be far from idyllic. Ask questions, educate yourselves, and don't accept the story at face value. Conservation should be about preserving heritage, not erasing it. This isn't just a call for change. It's a call for a revolution in conservation, a movement that puts the power back where it belongs, in the hands of the people of Kenya and other indigenous communities worldwide. For too long, they have been silent, watching as their lands, their heritage, and their rights were taken from them. But now, it's time for their voices to rise. It's time for the world to understand that true conservation honors both the land and the people who have lived in harmony with it for generations. This is not just about saving animals, it's about saving justice, humanity, and dignity. The choice is ours. We can continue to live in a world where conservation is a lie that only serves the powerful, or we can help build a world where conservation is a truth that empowers and respects the people who know this land best. The question is, what kind of world will you choose?